Yeah, hello, it's Sandy Murray here. Um, Today, I'm going to talk to you. I have on my business card a note that says, Let's talk affiliate marketing. And today, I'm going to talk to you about affiliate marketing and how it will help you start a home based business. Um, and the way we're going to be starting a home based business is we're going to be using the internet and we're going to be using our computers to do this. But before we get started, I just wanted you to know, like, what I do today is I will provide um, coaching support for anybody that's interested in starting a home-based business. But before I get started, I'd like to share my story with you, and it'll probably give you a better understanding of why I do what I do. So, the way this story takes place is that I'm 4 years old. I'm with my, I believe I'm with my dad, and certainly some of my brothers and sisters at that time. And my dad, because my mom's in a mental home, my dad is in a position that he just can't take care of us all. So he has to make a decision. So what he decides is that he actually takes me down to, he had to go to court, so he took me down to court, and I believe he had already arranged for my brother Laurie to go into the, what they call the Protestant orphanage in Halifax. And in my case, he said to the judge that he didn't want to put me up for adoption. He wanted to have me available as a foster child. I think his motivation there was to make sure that I maintained the Murray name. And anyway, so I start on my little roller coaster ride here. Is what happens is instead of going to the orphanage like my brother, one of my relatives decided that they thought they may be able to take care of me. Anyway, they were unsuccessful. And so what happened is um, I ended up with my first foster parents. And all I'm going to say about them is that they were rather mean to me. They scared me with regard to Satan. They'd actually have me locked up in a bathroom. They'd go outside and rake the rake across the window, and also that they were getting some modifications done to their home, and they indicated that I wasn't going to be there. Anyway, the next thing that happens is that I actually car drives up and I'm taken away from the house on Quarry Road, and I end up going to a house on Oak Street. And the lady there, her name was Mrs. Morris, and she uh, really was only taking me in to until they found a more reliable foster home for me. So anyway, but I do want to indicate to you that Mrs. Morris had 5 daughters. Her husband was dead, and that's a very important part of the story. But what happens is she was fantastic to me. I mean, just outstanding. I can honestly say at the beginning, I certainly wasn't fantastic to her. And there's some stories I could share with you with regard to what I mean by that. But essentially, I was just a bad kid. I think some of the reasons was that the kids in school used to, you know, refer to me as, they refer to me as adopted, and only because they said, where's your mother and where's your father, that type of thing. Kids can be pretty cruel. Anyway, what happens next is that Mrs. Morris ends up with cancer. I didn't know this at the time, but I found this out later when I sent for my records from the Children's Aid to get a better understanding of what really happened to me. Anyway, she met with the lady from the Children's Aid, and they agreed that I needed to go for a checkup, but Mrs. Morris did not want me to be a burden on the rest of her family because it had been her decision to take me in. Anyway, what she arranged was that I'd go for a checkup, and the lady at the Children's Aid was going to mention to me that I had a brother. Anyway, that all happens. I go to the I go for the checkup, and the lady, the Children's Aid, says, "You know, you have a brother." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know." She says, "Well, he's in the Protestant orphanage. How would you like to go over and meet him?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, let's do it." So she piled me in the car, and off we went to the orphanage. My brother wasn't at the orphanage. He was up at the church at the time. So we made our way up to the church, and I was just standing, and I'm looking at all these kids playing basketball, and I'm trying to figure out which one of these ones is my brother. Anyway, the basketball got over, and because my brother actually knew the ladies from the Children's Aid, he walked over and said, uh, you know, "I'm Laurie and I'm your brother." And I said, "Oh, okay. Hi, how are you?" That kind of thing. And then the lady from the Children's Aid says, "Well, let's go back to the orphanage and you can spend some time with your brother because I have to go run some errands." So I went there, and my brother showed me around, and you got to remember I'm 10 years old, so there was a very nice pool, not a deep pool, but a pool. There was swings, and probably the most important thing, there was lots of other children in the orphanage. Anyway, what happens is they say to me, "Listen, after I leave that day, the lady from the Children's Aid says, would you like to spend a weekend in the orphanage with your brother?" And I thought, yeah, this sounds great. So I did that, and I probably spent maybe 2 or 3 weekends. And then the next thing she says, "Well, how'd you like to spend a week?" And by that time, I had got to know some of my brother. I got to know some of the children in the orphanage. So yeah, I said yes. So I start to stay a week. Anyway, what happens is I end up staying in the orphanage uh, all all week and not coming home. So that's a major thing for me. So, and even worse was one of the daughters worked at the Halifax shipyards, and another thing is that a lot of the neighbors where I was living on Oak Street, they actually worked for the Halifax shipyards. So, when they would be going home, they would save some of their lunch for me, uh, and one of the daughters would do the same thing. And I'd put my hand through the fence because the whole orphanage was fenced. Is they'd give me an orange or they'd give me some of their lunch. Anyway, so uh, that's sort of just a little introduction to what was happening. Later, what I found out is that yes, Mrs. Morris was dying from cancer. She actually thought that that would be the best thing for me to be with my brother, and but on my side of the fence is no, that wasn't going to happen. So I actually ran away from the orphanage, and I actually arranged to get back with Mrs. Morris, and I think she, lived with cancer for roughly 2 years before she passed away. But before she passed away, she actually, because I was in the bedroom crying, and she brought me in, and no, one of the daughters brought me in and said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Well, because I know what's happening, and I think I'm going to have to go back to the orphanage." Anyway, uh, Mrs. Morris calls all the daughters in. They're at the end of the bed, and she makes them promise that they will not send me back to the orphanage. So the essence of that part is that uh, essentially is it works out that I end up having roughly 5 foster mothers or 7 foster mothers, depending on how you look at it. But it was like a roller coaster ride for me. I would spend summers with one foster mother and over in Cole Harbor. Then I'd be down in Bridgewater. Then I'd be down in Shad Bay. Then I'd be back on Oak Street. And so that is a challenging position for a young person to be in because you're with married people. They have their own families. They have their own kids. So you're kind of on the outside. Anyway, the essence of this story is that when I did get my records from the Children's Aid Society, one of the things throughout those records kept saying this young boy is very insecure. And I thought about that with regard to my business. And what I realized is that, one of the motivating forces for me to do my online business is I recognize that, if you're financially insecure, that could mean a big thing to you. If you're financially insecure, that's not a good feeling. So my overall goal in helping people build an online business is for them to make some residual income and for them actually to not have that feeling of insecurity, which I had as a child. So that's sort of the background of why I do what I do. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I'll be talking to you more about the why you would use affiliate marketing and why it makes sense to use affiliate marketing, and also I can give you the resources and the tools necessary to learn how to start your online business. So that's it for now, and we'll be back to you again in another video.